and it also has other different things that bind the nutrients in there. And once it's sprouted, it's no longer bound up. It's ready to be released. Good morning, everybody. So this is a glimpse of how we do our feed for our breeder pigs. Our breeder pigs, their nutritional needs are going to be a little bit different from our grower pigs. Our grower pigs are where we get our bacon and all of our meat and all like that. Our breeder pigs is how we obviously breed and all like that. So you've got your sow and your boar, okay? So this feed is for them. So I want to show you what we do. First, I've got a 15-gallon bucket here, okay? Protein lick tubs to your cattle, then you'll have plenty of these laying around. But if you have a grass finished operation or something like that and you don't have these right here, I guarantee you the farmers around you do, and they've got an excess of them. So I can go to any farmer in my area and get as many of these as I want. And they're pretty handy around the farm. I suggest you do that. This is 15 gallons, okay? So we pour about 100 pounds of corn into this 15-gallon bucket. And then we pour 2 5-gallon buckets of water. So it's about 10 gallons of water with that. We let that sit for a little bit. In the summertime, you can get away with few buckets. Okay, a lot less buckets. We can usually get away with about 2 buckets. Sometimes even just 1 is enough in the hot summer, okay? But in the wintertime here, you got to increase the amount of buckets you have. You got to increase the amount of stuff you have. We don't have the perfect system. I don't like it because it's a little messy. We're still trying to figure a system out here. But until we get it figured out, this is what we're doing. So in the wintertime, you can tell we've amped it up quite a bit just to try to keep the corn just right, okay? So after we put our 100 pounds of corn and our 10 gallons of water into our 15-gallon bucket, that sits for a few days depending on your weather, hot or cold, okay? It absorbs into the corn, and then the corn looks like this right here, okay? Like these 2 buckets. They absorb the majority of the water, if not all of it, okay? And then you'll start to sprout. Now, even in the wintertime here in the south, we're still getting sprouts, okay? You guys might not get sprouts if you're in a colder climate. If you are, you may consider putting this in the barn, putting it somewhere a little bit warmer. Doesn't have to be terribly warm. It only has to get up to maybe 50 degrees to start to get this sprout from what I've seen. You don't have to get this. If you don't get sprouted grain, it's not the end of the world, okay? But your fermentation process is still what you want, and you're still going to need around that higher temperature. It's just better. Worst case, you can just have soaked corn and it's still better. But you're going to be a lot better off if you can get this corn right here, if you can get it to sprout, okay? So for us, we get enough 50-degree days here in our part of the country where we just don't have a problem with it. It seems to sprout, like I said, as long as we get enough buckets and we give it more time, they go ahead and sprout. Now, the benefit of sprouting your corn over, say, just feeding it to them hard is grain has like a phytic acid in it, and it also has other different things that bind the nutrients in there. And once it's sprouted, it's no longer bound up. It's ready to be released, okay? That's protective mechanisms that's in the seed to help it to be more likely to sprout, okay? Be more likely to actually grow more corn, okay? So by sprouting that, you're allowing this to actually release more nutrients. So you're also making the protein that's in it more bioavailable. It's easier for the pig to absorb this corn, okay? And absorb the protein that is in it, because it's not high, it's not significantly high in protein. So you want them to absorb all the protein that they can from it, okay? We can also feed this to other animals if we choose to. Right now, the breeder pigs are the only pigs that we're feeding this to, but that's fine. So then your second stage, after it's sprouted, then we like to bring that back above some water. So here in just a minute, I'll take this 5-gallon bucket that I filled up, and I'll bring my water back to just barely around the surface. I don't want to go too high, because otherwise you could flood out, if it absorbs too much. And that's where the fermentation process happens. You know, because ideally you want them to sprout and then ferment. If you put too much water in there all at one time, they'll never sprout. They'll just go straight to fermenting, which isn't necessarily bad. But if you want the best, then you're going to go with a sprouted grain, and then you're going to ferment that sprouted grain. At first, it seems complicated. It seems like a lot of work, but once you get this down, this process down, it's easy. It's just as easy. You're not doing any, doesn't feel like you're doing any more work. It's not hard. It's just about getting the routine and the system right. And then now you're really giving your pigs the best possible food that you can give them for a very affordable price. A lot of times you can buy this corn straight from a farmer. There's several different options that you can do. Buy this corn, there's, you know, for the most affordable price for you, the best price that you can find. And I encourage you to go look around, even for other types of grain. Corn is the grain that we're able to use here, because it's got to be affordable in order to actually afford to own those breeder pigs. Otherwise, you know, because you're feeding them nonstop. So if you got a breeder pig and you feed them nonstop, if you're not careful, you'll end up feeding them so much you can't ever make that money back. So you've got to plan all that ahead. So this ends up being extremely nutritionally dense because of the sprouting process, but then the fermentation really helps their guts to absorb that, all of that protein that's in it. Because a pig's gut is kind of similar to a human's gut. They're an omnivore. They work well with eating a variety of foods, but certain foods like grains and things, they don't absorb as well as they would if they were eating meat. They would actually do better if you gave them just whole meat, okay? But so making it sprouted and then fermented is kind of like giving them sour. It's kind of like we're eating sauerkraut or kefir or something like that. It's really good for our guts. So putting that all in together just makes for an excellent feed source for them. It really helps their guts. It helps their health, especially in the wintertime. So we give them this all year round, and it's easier to make in the summer. But it is important in the wintertime because you're really helping their gut bacteria and helping the health of the pig throughout. So if it's at all possible, try to figure out a system. For us, it's 5 buckets. It might be 10 buckets for you. It might, and hopefully if you get a better system, it might be that too. You can amp this up, okay? You don't have to do this in these small buckets. You could do this in a large, big old huge bucket. Just dump all your feed in, and you could get a big bucket already. That's how you're buying your feed. You could go to a farmer or a feed store, wherever you're buying your feed, fill that 2,000 pounds up, and then do it inside that 2,000 pounds. You can make it work for your system, whether you're smaller or larger, however. So just keep that in mind, guys. The only thing is, once it does ferment, you don't want it to necessarily sit there forever. So it's not like you could just build this up, create a storage for eternity, and then boom, there it is. Now, here's the thing. If this did sit for too long, in the summertime, what happens is it starts to get black soldier fly larvae eating it afterwards, okay? That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not the stage we're going for, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because black soldier fly larvae is actually a really quality feed source, and I would argue maybe even a better feed source. So if that fills up with black soldier fly larvae, well, that's just a better feed source that you're getting. But ultimately, that's what we're going for in that. And black soldier fly larvae, there are better ways to create that feed, and we're going to go over videos in that in the future. All right, guys, like and subscribe. Thank you so much.